Yul Brynner watched Glenn Ford demonstrate the 40 hundredths of a second draw that had made him Hollywood's most technically precise gunfighter, and knew that Arizona's desert heat was about to witness something unprecedented. 3 different generations of speed meeting in the dusty streets of Old Tucson, where legends were made and measured. November 1964, 11:15 in the morning, when shadows cut sharp lines across the weathered boardwalks, and 23-year-old Bob Munden was about to show 2 of cinema's greatest stars why the world record for fast draw belonged to someone who treated physics like a polite suggestion rather than an absolute law. If you're fascinated by untold stories of Yul Brynner's encounters with the fastest guns in history, subscribe to Yul Brynner Untold Legacy for more hidden moments where Hollywood legends met real-world champions in unforgettable showdowns. The 48-year-old Ford stood in the center of Old Tucson's main street, his weathered face bronzed by decades of desert filming, his Colt single-action army clearing leather with the mechanical precision that had made him the gold standard for screen authenticity. The weapon itself was a work of art, custom-tuned by Hollywood's finest gunsmiths, its action smoothed to perfection, its balance adjusted for Ford's particular hand size and grip preference. Everything about his stance reflected decades of careful study, meticulous practice, and the kind of professional dedication that transformed acting technique into genuine skill. The morning sun had reached that perfect angle where it illuminated, without blinding, casting long shadows across the adobe buildings and wooden boardwalks that made Old Tucson the most authentic Western set in America. A light breeze stirred the desert dust, carrying the scent of sage and creosote that defined the Sonoran landscape. In the distance, the Santa Catalina Mountains rose like ancient guardians over this theater of make-believe that had become more real than reality for countless Western films. 0.4 seconds flat, announced the timekeeper, a grizzled stunt coordinator named Jack Wilson, who had worked every major Western production since the 1940s. His stopwatch was a professional-grade Hoyer, accurate to hundredths of seconds, the same instrument used by Olympic timekeepers. Consistent, repeatable, camera perfect. Glenn, that's why directors fight over you for gun work. Ford holstered his weapon with characteristic modesty, his weathered face showing none of the satisfaction that lesser actors might display after such a demonstration. His movements carried the unconscious grace of someone who had performed the same sequence thousands of times, each repetition honing muscle memory until conscious thought became unnecessary. At 48, he had earned his reputation not through flashy showmanship, but through the quiet competence that made audiences believe they were watching authentic frontier skill rather than Hollywood performance. "Just doing the job," Ford said in his distinctive understated manner, adjusting his gun belt with the casual familiarity of a man who had worn one for so long it had become part of his natural silhouette. "When you're playing a character who lives by his gun, you better make it look like you know what you're doing. Audiences can spot fake technique from the cheap seats." The assembled crew nodded with genuine respect. Ford's dedication to authenticity had become legendary throughout Hollywood. He spent weeks before each Western production practicing with actual frontier weapons, studying historical accounts of gunfighters, consulting with old-timers who remembered the dying days of the actual Wild West. In an era when many Western stars relied on camera angles and editing to create the illusion of speed, Glenn Ford had developed actual capability that required no special effects or cinematic tricks. 40 hundredths is damn fast, called out Tommy Rodriguez, the young Mexican-American grip who had been working Old Tucson sets since he was 16. "Fastest I've ever seen on a movie set, Mr. Ford." Ford nodded his thanks, but his attention was already shifting to the familiar figure emerging from the shade of the cantina set. 44-year-old Yul Brynner moved through the desert heat like a force of nature that had adapted to extreme conditions, his black clothes absorbing the Arizona sun, while his presence somehow managed to cool the superheated air around him. Fresh from the Magnificent Seven's massive success, Yul carried himself with the controlled authority that had made Chris Adams one of cinema's most iconic gunfighters. His approach across the dusty street was measured, deliberate, each step suggesting depths of preparation that went beyond conventional acting training. The spurs on his boots created a soft metallic rhythm against the packed earth, a sound that somehow commanded more attention than louder demonstrations of presence. "Impressive as always, Glenn," Yul said, his accented voice carrying easily across the dusty street despite its conversational tone. "Your technique serves the camera beautifully. Professional, reliable, exactly what the role requires." He approached the demonstration area with those same measured steps, each movement suggesting that every action served a specific purpose in a larger design that only he fully understood. The crew instinctively created space for him, recognizing the kind of authority that didn't need to announce itself. However, Yul continued, and that single word transformed the afternoon from casual professional courtesy into something approaching artistic competition. "I've always believed that authentic character work requires understanding the real demands of the role. Without any visible preparation, without the preliminary adjustments that typically preceded quick-draw demonstrations," Yul's hand moved toward his weapon. What followed challenged everyone's understanding of what human reflexes could accomplish. The Colt appeared in his hand like it had materialized there, the entire sequence from leather to firing position completed with speed that made Ford's impressive demonstration look leisurely by comparison. "Jesus Christ," Wilson whispered, consulting his professional stopwatch with the expression of someone whose understanding of human capability had just been fundamentally challenged. 0.2 seconds. "I've been timing draws for 20 years, and I've never seen anything like that." The silence that followed was profound and complete. Every person present understood they had just witnessed something that operated beyond normal categories of film technique or professional skill. This wasn't just faster than Ford's considerable speed, it was faster than thought itself, operating in realms where conscious decision-making became irrelevant to the physical action. Ford studied Yul with new respect, recognizing a level of capability that his own considerable training had never approached. "That was extraordinary, Yul. How does someone develop reflexes that operate faster than conscious thought?" "Necessity," Yul replied simply, his weapon already back in its holster with the same impossible speed he had used to draw it. "When the alternative to speed is permanent consequences, you learn to eliminate hesitation from the equation entirely. The circus taught me that doubt and survival don't coexist." The explanation hung in the desert air, like a lesson about the different crucibles that shaped human capability. Ford's speed had been developed for entertainment, refined through repetition and professional dedication. Yul's speed had been forged by circumstances where failure carried prices that couldn't be measured in retakes or professional embarrassment. But before the conversation could develop further, a new voice cut across the desert air, with the polite confidence of someone accustomed to interrupting conversations among legends. "Excuse me, gentlemen," said 23-year-old Bob Munden, approaching from where he had been setting up specialized equipment for his own demonstration. "I don't mean to interrupt, but I couldn't help overhearing the conversation about speed and technique." Every eye turned toward the young man who had recently been certified by the Guinness Book of World Records as the world's fastest draw. Despite his youth, something in his bearing suggested capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. He moved with the unconscious efficiency of someone who had eliminated every unnecessary motion from his repertoire, creating an economy of movement that bordered on the supernatural. "Mr. Ford, Mr. Brynner," Mundon continued with obvious respect, "I've studied both of your techniques extensively through film analysis and professional consultation. Your screen work represents the absolute pinnacle of Hollywood gunfighting authenticity. It's an genuine honor to meet you both in person." Ford nodded graciously, his professional instincts recognizing something exceptional in the young man's demeanor. "We've heard about your record, son. 0.02 seconds. That's faster than human perception should theoretically allow." "It is fast," Mundon agreed without false modesty, but also without the arrogance that might be expected from someone who held such an extraordinary record. "But speed is just one element of the equation. What you gentlemen bring to your performances, character development, dramatic authority, screen presence, Those are capabilities that can't be measured with stopwatches or recorded in record books. Yul studied the young champion with the careful attention he brought to anything that might expand his understanding of human potential. "You're very diplomatic for someone who holds the world record. But I think we're all curious about what 0.02 seconds actually looks like in practice." The suggestion hung in the desert air like a challenge that everyone present recognized as historically significant. 3 different approaches to speed: Hollywood technical precision, cinema dramatic authority, and pure competitive record-breaking capability were about to be demonstrated in the same location within the span of minutes. "If you're sure you want to see it," Mundon said, moving to his designated position with movements that seemed to flow rather than step, eliminating the distinction between transition and destination. "Though I should warn you, it happens faster than most people can consciously process." Wilson raised his professional stopwatch, his hands trembling slightly with the excitement of timing what promised to be the fastest human movement he would ever witness. "Ready when you are, Bob." What happened next defied visual comprehension entirely. Mundon's hand moved, or rather, didn't appear to move at all. One moment his weapon was holstered, the next it was pointed downrange in perfect firing position, with no visible transition between the 2 states. The motion occurred so quickly that it bypassed normal human perception entirely, existing in a realm where physics and human capability intersected at their absolute limits. 0.02 seconds. Wilson announced in a voice that carried the awe of someone who had just witnessed the absolute limit of human capability. "Confirmed. World record speed. I've never seen anything like it in 20 years of timing professional demonstrations." The silence that followed was absolute and profound. Ford and Yul, both masters of their respective approaches to gunfighting, stood motionless as they processed what they had just experienced. This wasn't just faster than their own considerable speeds. It was faster than thought itself, operating in realms where conscious decision-making became completely irrelevant to physical execution. "Remarkable," Ford said finally, his voice carrying genuine admiration mixed with professional amazement. "That's not technique anymore, Bob. That's something else entirely. How does someone even train for that kind of speed?" "Years of systematic elimination," Mundon replied, his tone carrying the precision of someone who had analyzed every aspect of his own capability. "Every wasted motion, every hesitation, every thought that creates delay between decision and action. You strip away everything unnecessary until only the essential movement remains." He looked at both men with obvious respect and genuine appreciation. "But what you gentlemen accomplish requires something fundamentally different: the ability to combine speed with character development, reflexes with storytelling, technique with dramatic truth. That's artistry that goes far beyond pure physical capability." Yul nodded slowly, his dark eyes moving between the 2 men as he processed the implications of what they had all just demonstrated. 3 different approaches to the same fundamental challenge. Glenn represents technical mastery in service of authentic entertainment. You represent pure human capability pushed to its theoretical limits. "And you?" Ford asked with genuine curiosity. "I represent speed as character expression," Yul replied thoughtfully. "Fast enough to be believable, controlled enough to serve story, authoritative enough to command respect from other characters and audiences alike. Different purposes, different requirements." Bob Munden studied both men with the appreciation of someone who understood that mastery took many forms, each valuable for its intended application. In competitive fast draw, speed is everything, the only measurement that matters. But what you do requires speed plus dozens of other skills I've never had to develop. Acting ability, screen presence, the capacity to make audiences believe in your character's reality. The 3 men stood together in the desert heat, each representing a different relationship with the same fundamental skill. Ford's 40/100ths of a second served entertainment authentically and effectively. Yul's 20/100ths served dramatic authority with compelling power. Mundon's 2/100ths served the pure pursuit of human limitation, pushed to its absolute boundary. Wilson, still holding his professional stopwatch, shook his head in continuing amazement. "I've been timing quick-draw demonstrations for 20 years across dozens of film productions. Today I witnessed three completely different definitions of what fast means, and every single one of them was absolutely correct for its intended purpose. Years later, Glenn Ford would describe that afternoon as one of the most educational encounters of his career. I thought I was fast until I met Yul. I thought Yul was impossibly fast until I met Bob Munden. But what I learned was that we were all fast for completely different reasons, and those reasons mattered as much as the speed itself.